Today we're talking about the compatibility between the mutable moon signs, that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. The cardinal signs take action to start new things. The fixed signs secure things in place and stabilize them, where the mutable signs are about adapting and bringing change. Gemini and Virgo are both ruled by Mercury, and Sagittarius and Pisces are both ruled by Jupiter in traditional astrology. Gemini is the mutable air sign, which talks about changing your mind, getting new information, and changing your intellectual perspective on it. Virgo is the earth sign ruled by Mercury, and it talks about being physically adaptable, adapting your schedule, and adapting to the minutiae of everyday life. Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign, so it talks about adapting and changing your sense of self or your ego, self exploration, and finding out what you like and what you don't like. Pisces is the mutable water sign, so it talks about adapting and changing your emotions, being able to swim through your emotions and navigate through even the deepest, darkest fears of your subconscious. Sometimes it even talks about avoiding those uncomfortable emotions through escapism. The trickiest part about mutable moon sign synastry is that mutable signs are constantly shifting and adapting and changing. So someone with a mutable moon sign may have emotions that are constantly shifting and changing. One minute you feel emotionally invested in something or you feel a certain type of way, and then 30 seconds later, your emotions have completely shifted. For people who don't understand a mutable moon's ability to adapt their emotions from second to second, it can come off as someone who's like emotionally wishy-washy, flaky, or two-faced. And that's where Gemini gets the two-faced stereotype from. Gemini is the twins, or the two faces, the polar opposites that are somehow true at the same time. The mutable signs talk about integrating those two polarities. Virgo is where the more complex sorting and organization and separation occurs. Sagittarius is where the simpler integration occurs, where you take a man and a horse to make a centaur. Then Pisces is where all of the really complex integration happens, where you're integrating all of these repressed parts of your subconscious into your consciousness in order to be reconnected with your shadow self. This is shadow work. Let's say you have two separate sides of a story and you're trying to figure out what's the truth. The mutable signs are going to help you do that. Gemini is where you separate the two sides of the story. Virgo then dives into those two separate sides of the story in order to pick apart truth from falsehood, the actual facts from deception or things that are untrue. Sagittarius then takes the truths that are organized by Virgo and combines them or integrates them in order to create the full picture, the zoomed out perspective that contains both sides of the story. Pisces is about reflecting on the falsehoods or the deception, either a subconscious reason why somebody may have had a distorted perspective of the truth of what really happened, or why someone is trying to hide or conceal something with deception. We're starting with the oppositions. First is Gemini moon opposite Sagittarius moon. Now they're in a compatible element where the air of Gemini is going to help to fuel the fire of Sagittarius. Gemini moon is somebody who's going to feel emotionally satisfied and nurtured when they have the ability to explore their thoughts and their ideas, their curiosities by asking questions. Sagittarius is going to feel emotionally nurtured and satisfied when they have the ability to explore and ponder those questions in order to get answers, in order to connect the dots and give Gemini the answers to the questions that they're asking. And typically the really big answers that Sagittarius has triggers more thoughts and ideas within the Gemini, and it creates this really interesting exchange of information and ideas. But remember, they're still in an opposition. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the planet that talks about separating and breaking things down, while Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet that talks about putting things together and integrating them. So Gemini moon may be somebody who is always trying to find a hole in someone's argument, trying to break down someone's ideas in order to improve those ideas, whereas Sagittarius is trying to fill the hole in somebody's thought process, trying to share their wisdom in order to get someone to see a greater perspective. And so the Gemini and Sagittarius energy may conflict in that area. The Sagittarius moon may try to share the greater perspective, where the Gemini moon is just interested in playing devil's advocate and participating in a debate. Looking at the next opposition, we have Virgo moon opposite Pisces moon, which again, Virgo is ruled by Mercury and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So a similar opposition energy is playing out with these mutable signs. Virgo is an earth sign, so it talks about physical earth, our practical reality, and focusing in on all of the details of that practical reality. Pisces is a water sign, and again, it's ruled by Jupiter, so it talks about zooming out to see the big picture of all of the things that are happening, even the things that we can't physically see right in front of us. It talks about the things that are hidden behind veils or in alternate dimensions that our physical bodies cannot access, such as the dream realm, the astral realm, and the spiritual realm in whole. So that is one of the main things with this opposition, is that Virgo moons tend to feel emotionally satisfied and secure and balanced when they are focusing on the physical, when they're focused on real life and organizing and maintaining their real life. Pisces moons tend to feel more emotionally satisfied and nurtured and safe emotionally when they have the opportunity to expand their mind beyond the physical and allow their minds and consciousness to drift off into their dreams and their visions and the things that go beyond our physical existence. But if these two people, despite their emotional differences, can share a common goal, then they can actually tackle it from both ends. Where the Virgo moon is going to be focused on the practical work that needs to be done in this physical realm to make something happen. And the Pisces moon is going to work behind the scenes, behind the veil, to make sure that the energies are aligned for this to actually happening, doing the spiritual work in the astral realm and energetic work on them and their partner in order to make sure that everyone's in sync and aligned with whatever reality they're trying to manifest or create. The first square is Gemini moon, square Virgo moon. Both of these signs are ruled by Mercury, so they both talk about our brain and our mind, our thought process, our communication, and how we are interacting with information and data. Gemini is the first iteration of Mercury, so it talks about introduction to new information, exchange of ideas, and exploring new thoughts, whereas Virgo is the second iteration of Mercury, and it talks about refining those questions to be more clear and precise, refining the information and combing through a lot of information in order to find the facts that will help answer your questions. So this square might exhibit some conflict where the Gemini moon is going to feel most emotionally content and satisfied and secure when they have the opportunity to ask new questions, to explore new ideas, even if they're not refining these ideas to perfection. Where the Virgo moon isn't going to get that emotional satisfaction until the ideas that are being exchanged have had a chance to been ironed out, where all the details have been sorted and organized to make sure that the thought is actually clear and precise. The Virgo moon may be frustrated by the Gemini moon's lack of focus and their ability to just move on to the next idea without actually doing the work to refine it. And the Gemini moon might be frustrated with the Virgo moon being boring or not being willing to explore new ideas and being focused only on refining the ideas that they're already working on. If the Gemini moon can be patient with the Virgo moon as they work together to refine their ideas and bring them into clarity, then this can be a really great pair for coming up with new ideas and clarifying those ideas. But if the Gemini moon is constantly looking for mental stimulation and they get bored easily, then the Virgo moon, who feels most comfortable in a routine, consistently applying themselves and consistently exploring an idea in order to clarify it and bring it to perfection, then they're going to view the Gemini moon as someone who is just chaotic and messy and disrupts the flow of their routine. The next square is Virgo square Sagittarius. Again, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So the biggest conflict between Virgo and Sagittarius is that Virgo is focused on the practical nature of reality, working and adapting within the limitations of our physical reality. Sagittarius is the sign that talks about expansion, growth, not having any limitations. And so Sagittarius is constantly looking at the big picture. Virgo, who's focused on the details, the minutia, is going to feel a sense of frustration with Sagittarius, who doesn't necessarily want to abide to the practical limitations of reality. If the Virgo moon doesn't understand the free spirited nature of the Sagittarius moon, they might view them as somebody who is unrealistic, who's not focused on the details of their everyday life and is focused on this pipe dream or this big picture vision that isn't really practical or realistic. And the Sagittarius moon, who's going to need a sense of adventure and exploration in order to satisfy their emotional needs, may feel very judged by the Virgo moon, who is nitpicking all of the details of what they're doing and is telling them what they should and shouldn't do, trying to impose this perfectionism upon them, where a Sagittarius is just trying to find themselves, and you need to make mistakes in order to do that. With that being said, if their emotional differences are understood, then this Virgo Sagittarius square can actually be really beneficial, where the Virgo moon is sorting out all of the details, sorting out fact from fiction, and the Sagittarius is helping to put those facts together to get the full picture. Virgo is doing the breakdown and the analysis, and Sagittarius is drawing the conclusion from that analysis. The Virgo moon can help the Sagittarius moon to understand the details or the minutia of a situation, where Sagittarius can help the Virgo moon to zoom out and see the bigger picture of all the details that they've been sorting out. Think of putting together a puzzle. The Virgo moon is the person who organizes all the puzzle pieces by color, separates all the edge and corner pieces so that you can easily begin the puzzle construction, where Sagittarius is the one actually connecting those puzzle pieces to create the bigger picture. Next, we have Sagittarius moon square Pisces moon. They're both ruled by Jupiter, so they both talk about zooming out to see the bigger picture. Sagittarius is the fire sign, so it talks about ego and sense of self. Zooming out to see the full collective, the full picture, and where you, as a person, as an individual, fall into that greater story of the collective. Pisces is the water sign ruled by Jupiter, so it talks about your emotions and specifically your subconscious emotions. So it talks about zooming out of the emotional picture to identify which emotions are yours and which emotions are other people's emotions that you are just feeling empathetically. As the fire sign, Sagittarius talks about shining a light on the things that you do like, putting a light on the good things, looking at the bright side and keeping an optimistic perspective. As the water sign, Pisces talks about concealing and hiding away the things that you don't like behind a veil of illusion or distortion. It rules over repressed emotions and memories that get pushed down into the subconscious. So Sagittarius talks about zooming out to see the full picture of things that everyone is consciously aware of. Your sense of self and how you relate to the rest of the collective consciousness. Pisces talks about zooming out and seeing the full picture of the collective subconscious, fishing out your own personal emotions from this giant mixing pot of collective subconscious emotions. And it's a much darker and more difficult process than the process that happens in Sagittarius. And so the main source of conflict here is that the Sagittarius moon is going to satisfy their own emotional needs by looking on the bright side, by finding a way to bring humor into the situation and laugh their pain away. Their emotional satisfaction depends on laughter and jovial energy, whereas the Pisces moon is more likely to fall into an emotional spiral where they are drowning in these dark emotions, and the optimistic perspective of the Sagittarius moon feels like mocking. Another thing to consider, they're both ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter rules excess and overabundance. Sagittarius moon is going to feel emotionally satisfied when they can overindulge, when they can feast with friends and have a big party where everyone is socializing and focused on good times with good friends. Pisces talks about avoidance of uncomfortable emotions. So when Pisces moons tend to imbibe in that same way, instead of focusing on the good, they're trying to drown out the negative, and it results in them feeling foggy and blurry and even more emotionally confused and lost than they were before. Especially since Pisces moons have way more fluid of emotional boundaries. They're more likely to be energetically drained when they're in large groups. They're more likely to take on the emotions of other people, empathically feeling emotions that don't even belong to them. So it's a much more messy situation for a Pisces moon to be energetically entangled with a huge group of people when they're not feeling great. Whereas the Sagittarius moon, it's going to help to lighten their mood a lot easier. The last square is between Pisces moon and Gemini moon, and the biggest source of conflict with these two signs has to be their elements. Pisces moon is a water moon, and so they're going to feel most emotionally satisfied when they have time to explore their own emotions, but also their imagination, their visions for the future, and kind of romanticizing life to create fantasies for themselves to escape the heavy, harsh reality of everyday life. Gemini is an air sign, so for them to feel emotionally satisfied, they need intellectual stimulation. They need to be asking questions and exchanging information and ideas. And so if the Pisces moon is spending too much time creating false realities to numb away their uncomfortable emotions, the Gemini moon may not feel enough intellectual stimulation from that person, and vice versa, where if the Gemini moon is too focused on intellect and exchanging ideas and communicating and talking, it can almost ruin the fantasy that the Pisces moon is trying to create for themselves. We talked about Gemini as the energy of the devil's advocate, someone who's always looking to find a hole in somebody else's argument. Whereas Pisces, if they're spending time trying to either create illusions or live within a fantasy, then the Gemini moon is very easily going to come in and spoil their fantasy or expose the flaws in their illusion. So the Pisces moon is trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and the Gemini moon is like, I saw you put that rabbit in that hat before you started the magic trick. You didn't fool me.